folk of Alexander, and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander, and such great names as these. But of all...
Hello and welcome to today's BattleMech Quick View. We are going to look at Bergan Industries Champion, which was a nice attempt, let's say, to a new BattleMech, but it had some issues. It is one of those mechs that is not the favorite of most people, but it does have a fairly nice looking body kit, so it does get extra points for that. The champion is affected by what we like to call the curse of fast heavies. First thing we need to remember when dealing with battle mechs is that speed is relative to the size of the power plant that you put in them. The bigger the power plant, the higher your top speed. The problem is, fusion power plants are very efficient, but they're also fairly heavy. They're not the most efficient piece of hardware. If we want something more efficient, we'd probably need to go with the XL or XXL engine in terms of speed, efficiency, or weight. Those larger engines come with a size difference shown here. In order to get really fast heavies, you need to have a very heavy power plant or a very large one, which generally means you have to start trading off different things. And most of the time, that trade-off comes between survivability or firepower. When the clans introduced their own version of space magic with the better XXL engine and better XL engine and better endo steel and all that fancy gadgets, fast heavies were more possible. Got two examples of fast heavies and one fast assault on there, with the Cochet, which was a complete failure, the Lancelot, which was pretty good but used an XL engine. It was not very survivable, and the typical Charger, which is an assault mech with 5 small lasers. So you do have a variety of mechs in that fast, heavy, fast assault category, but you will see that most of them have fairly large drawbacks. So Bergan Industries was a staple and a household name for the SLDF and various member states at the time. And at the start of the 27th century, there was no major war, there was no big conflicts. The SLDF was established, and all you really had was police action, skirmishes, low-intensity action, pirate hunts, and such. When the SLDF asked for a fast recon, fast strike mech, Bergan, which had already produced things like the Locust, was happy to oblige and introduced their own new mech with the Champion. And Bergan really thought this was a perfect design and didn't want to iterate on it anymore. Probably more of a case of they fired all of the engineers that made the damn thing after they completed the work, so they would have needed to rehire a whole bunch of people. D1N Champion is your standard run-of-the-mill champion that comes with a Vlar 300 engine, which is a pretty darn big engine, but it's very common. It's an engine that you see in many other mechs, and one that is readily available, especially to the SLDF. That engine, though, weighs about a third of the weight of the mech, giving it a top speed of about 85 kilometers per hour. It uses a regular skeleton, but ferrofibrous armor, 8 tons of it, which is not that much for a 60-ton battle mech. And it only has 10 standard heat sinks, so you stay warm in it, basically. As far as weaponry goes, it is fairly well armed with an LB-10X autocannon with 2 tons of ammo, so you can normally set up 1 set of slug and 1 set of cluster rounds. A 6-rack of SRMs, augmented by Artemis fire control, a pair of medium lasers, and a pair of small lasers. Doesn't have hands, so it can't do a whole lot of physical attacks, and it can't be used in other things than combat, but that's just a small drawback. Of course, once it started taking the field, a lot of people understood that it was not a perfect machine. People at Bergan, like I said, didn't really care about that and didn't want to go back to the design because they just wanted to keep selling the darn thing. Those commanders within the SLDF and other purchasers, as soon as it was available, went and played in the mech's innard, replaced the entire cooling setup with double heat sinks, which didn't take really any extra room as the engine, the FLAR 300, is large enough that you can easily fit it with double heat sinks rather than standard ones and not have any loss of efficiency. This increased the field performance by a fair margin. 1N2 version of the champion generally doesn't have any performance issue. The other refit that I've seen a lot of people do is replace the small lasers with an extra ton of armor. This is not a standard refit, but it's just a thing that I've seen a lot of people do, and I've seen a lot of those come by. Of course, there was one group of people the people at Bergan were ready to listen to, and it was the SLDF Royal Regiments, and they asked for their own version of the champion, which was a completely different beast with the Royal Champion 1NB. The cooling system is of course replaced with double heat sinks, and there's a good reason for that. The weaponry on the mech is basically stripped off and replaced with a Gauss rifle and an ERPPC. So we are going from a skirmisher to a fast sniper. Not the worst setup in the world. You might see some of those floating around. You might see some people having refit their own champions to that setup as well. I am perfectly okay with it in its dedicated role. During the Succession War, obviously technology kind of took a step back, but Bergan still had their factories on New Earth, and they were not affected by any strategic nuking, basically. Of course, when you were building a champion without the fancy bits, you're gonna have some issues. While the LBX autocannon is replaced with a standard 10 class autocannon, the SRM doesn't have its guiding system, and that basically evens out because an Artemis fire control weighs about a ton and a standard autocannon weighs about a ton over the LBX. Where you have the biggest loss is with the armor, because you go from ferrofibrous, which gives about 12% more coverage per ton, to standard alloy, so you're fairly fragile. One of the advantages though, at that point, everything is off the rack. There's nothing fancy. The power plant is extremely common. It's a plant that's used in the Assault Atlas, the very, very common Marauder, so you don't have any issues with logistics with your champion outside of some of the guidance parts and some of the weird body kit issues. While Comstar had a clan buster version of the champion, it never really caught on, and the one fairly modern champion that you might see is the 3P version from the Word of Blake. It's not very survivable, having an XL engine stuck into it, but it does use double heat sinks. The LBX autocannon is replaced with an Ultra autocannons for double firing speed, and it has 4 ER medium lasers, which becomes at that point a very deadly medium range skirmisher. That's a bit fragile. You do have the proprietary C3I computer, so it shares targeting information with other mechs in its level 2, and uses an improved NARC beacon launcher instead of the SRM-6 to allow missile guidance. I am never a fan of NARC beacons, personally. It's not a piece of hardware that I recommend using. I would have kept a 6-rack SRM, but that's what the Word of Blake did, and I was never a fan of them to begin with. The clan never made a 2C version of the champion, but I'll be honest, all the champions that have gone through clanification follow the same standard, so it's basically a 2C champion. The engine is an XL engine, so it is larger, but as a clan tech engine, if you lose function of one of the side torsos, you're not going to be completely crippled. And you do add 5 jump jets. So the mech is very mobile for a mech in its weight class. All the lasers that were there are replaced with pulse versions. So you got 2 med pulse lasers and 2 small pulse lasers, which makes the champion a very nice anti-infantry machine as well. You also put in 2 regular ER medium lasers, a clan LBX, a clan SRM-6 with Artemis, and the armor is replaced with clan-grade ferrofibrous, which is 20% more coverage per ton rather than 12% more coverage per ton. That makes the Champion C, or I would honestly call it Champion 2C, a very good skirmisher cavalry mech. While I haven't really seen any dumb periphery refit, there was that one dumb experimental refit that Bergan tried to do. They really wanted to get into that whole land-air mech thing and transforming mechs, so they went like, yeah, we're going to make the Champion fly since it's perfect. Pro tip, it really didn't. All the tests failed, various catastrophic levels. Most of the time, the assembly, when you started transforming, didn't work correctly. It kind of fell apart or did permanent damage to the body or internal structure. And even though it was dumb from the start, it was also downgunned and only carried 3 medium lasers and a 6-rack SRM. A lot of times when we have those dumb refits, I'm like, yeah, it could work if you do this, or it could work because it's stupid. In this case, it just doesn't. Once again, we basically talked about an oft-maligned mech, which is starting to be a bit of a trend when looking at our company's instructional videos. The Champion is really not a terrible skirmisher, even though it's pretty fragile. There are probably some refits that would be more efficient for it. I've rebuilt more than one actually with an Ultra AC5 and more armor, rather than the LBX autocannon. Gives you a little bit more survivability and range. Not a bad thing. There was that one that we rebuilt for anti-infantry work, where we started sticking flamers and machine guns on it rather than the lasers and small lasers. Yeah, it was made to kill infantry and be mean about it. The fact that this is another mech that was built throughout the Succession War, even though in not EU mount, means that you're likely to be able to find one as a mercenary commander. Probably not the first mech you should be hunting for, however. It's one of those that you put in a particular role as a skirmisher and set up a lance with it. So maybe take your time if you have Champion or the opportunity to buy a Champion to see, well, will I be able to keep it running? So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you very much for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.